Welcome back to Real Conversations with Nora for our 30th episode. And our topic of discussion this week is from my latest book, From a Black Man's Perspective. And joining me today are some of the men featured in the book. Bishop Charles Ellis, Vop Osili, Chuck Williamson, and Charles Searcey. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Oh my goodness, this has just been such a journey. Thank you, thank you. And again, thank you for even participating in the project. As I said earlier, I'm so excited. We just got the congratulations that it is on Amazon. So I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, congratulations.
That is so awesome. But we had a viewer share that her and her husband were both present in their home, but their son chose to go in the wrong direction. So Bishop Ellis, I'm going to start with you right there. Tell me your thoughts on that. Here you have both parents in the household, but he chose to go in the wrong direction, which we know that can happen. You know, you could do everything right with your kid, and they could just decide, hey, I ain't going to listen.
Yeah. Well, you know, there are no guarantees in life. You know, you can put your kid in a bubble and try to protect them and try to keep them from the dangers of the world, but you can't be with them 24/7. They grow up at some point in time. And someone said, you really don't know who your kids are until they leave the home. You know, when they're around you, at least our kids, because we grew up old school, my parents could look at us and we would straighten up. And we raised our kids that way. I don't want to have to raise my voice in public. I could just look at you and be still, stop cutting up. Well, now, at the end of the day, you still don't know who your kids are until they leave you. You don't know what your kids will do with their money until you're gone. So, you know, there are no guarantees in life, and that's unfortunate. But we do know that the chances of a functional husband and wife in the home, setting the proper example for their children, you know, 9 times out of 10, that kid will find the right path. And at least even if they get off on the wrong path, they know what's right and they know how to come back as a prodigal son. And you just hope at some point in time they come to themselves.
Right. Chuck Williamson, tell us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I agree. There's so many variables that impact young people's lives today. I'm amazed at the amount of information and influences that are coming at them. I think the best thing that we as parents can do is try to be present. Obviously, they're gonna taste the world. They're gonna be out there when they go to school and when they matriculate into college and things like that. So I think it's a reality that some of the influences that they're gonna see, they're there whether we try to cover them or not. I think the best thing we can do is through our presence and our modeling behaviors for them, let them see that our actions line up with our words, you know, the things that we're telling them to not do or do, you know, hopefully we're modeling those things so those lessons come back to them when they face the challenges that they see. Certainly I wasn't a perfect kid. My parents did the best they could for me, but certainly I tasted the world a little bit.
Right.
But as the bishop said, you know, you come back to what you know. I think that's the most powerful point there. Is you tend to come back to what you know and what you've been taught and what you've seen in your home.
Right.
Yeah.
What's your thought on it, Bob?
I think I have to agree with the example of the prodigal son. You know, we can do the very best that we can as parents and set that example, you know, and be functional and available. But sometimes all of us, and I know myself, for example, we have to learn by our own experience. But the good part is if we've had our parents there, regardless, we know where the safe spot is and where the real home spot is and where we do belong. And pretty soon, I mean, God will teach us one way or the other.
Right.
You know, do we keep pursuing this wrong path, or do we go back to that place of safety, ask for, like, you know, redemption and forgiveness?
Right.
But we at least have a place to go back to, I think, if we set the example.
Right. Bishop, I want to come back to you because I knew your father, and I would you know, we called him Doc, but what amazed me about Bishop Ellis Sr. that he was not, and I don't know if I want to call it control, but there was just an enormous amount of respect that you and your brothers and sisters had for him. And even to the point when you were older, you wanted to do something and he didn't agree with it, you guys did not do it. And it was just, I was just like, because that is so not the norm, you know.
Most kids when they get old, 18 or whatever the case is, their parents' words have less impact, influence, meaning, value. I think us having the experience of my dad, pretty much whatever he said, it turned out to be right. Whatever decision he asked us or choice if he chose something for us during those times of our lives when he was making choices, it turned out to be the good choice. So I think our experience with him was that, this guy pretty much is right. You know what I'm saying? So it was not we can't do something else, but it's like I would always, Nora, I would bring young ladies around my dad just to see what his facial expression was. You know what I'm saying? I didn't ask him, could I date him or not? Some of them I was already dating, but I just brought them around him just to see his facial expression. And for that matter, my mom too, because, if they had an ease with them, if they felt in their spirit, a camaraderie or and I'm telling you, if it was a bad vibe, I pretty much like I won't be taking her out no more. You know what I'm saying? and pretty much it wasn't about they said we could or we couldn't, but the experience that all growing up, they pretty much knew what was going on. They made the good decisions for us, right decisions, and what they told us, it turned out to be the right thing. So I think we had a respect for the experience that we had with their decision-making principles.
Bishop, talk a little bit in the book, because in the book you talked about how his presence in the home was like a huge shadow of protection for you. And you talked a lot about your relationship with him and the enormous amount of respect that you had for him, that the little that I know, the respect that the community, not only in the household, but the community in Detroit had for him, and his ability, which and maybe I'm being a little prejudiced, but I really think that has really triggered over majorly with you, because when I look at you, I see so much of him, the big thinking, people, the enormous amount of respect that the people in Detroit had for him as well as for you. So can you talk a little bit about that?
You really become who you see. You really become who you're influenced by. And somebody said, what do most people covet? They said they covet what they see all the time. And that can be if you're in a drug environment and everybody's selling drugs and driving big cars and wearing Gucci belts and all that kind of stuff, then you kind of covet that because that's what you see all the time. If you see education and if you see individuals going to college, you say, hey, well, what are you going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to college because that's what I see all the time. And I look at funeral homes. Most of those kids, end up taking over the funeral home because they've grown up in that business. It's no secret that this man is an attorney. His wife is an attorney. Well, why would their kids not be attorneys? It's all they've seen. That doesn't mean they have to, but it's all they've seen. So I think I've seen my dad. And again, when you're young, you don't know you're poor. You don't know you're in a project because the project is all in Chicago. Right. And when we came over to Detroit at 4 years old, he took over this small church and, was looking to get a job because the congregation couldn't take care of him. But I don't know anything about that. All I know is that, we ate. I don't know pork chops exist. You know what I'm saying? Because lima beans and rice and black eyed peas is good. And spam is great when you don't know about ham. Once you know about ham, then you're like, hey, y'all been holding out on me. So my parents were able to give us those things that we needed and not necessarily those things that we desired. And guess what? We didn't desire those things until we started seeing those things. I didn't know anything about Chucks until I saw somebody at school, junior high, with Converse All-Stars. So I learned from that and the tremendous respect of him being a person who took care of the house. Right. And he took care of the house, not with designer stuff because we couldn't have that, but you had what you need. You had gym shoes. You had blue jeans for school. You had school supplies. So again, I look at myself and say, why do I pay for my son, my daughter, my wife, their haircuts and hair, whatever. Why do I pay a guy? Why do I pay Rodney at the end of the month for everybody when everybody got jobs? It's because we got haircuts and my dad would pay the barber for the 3 boys at the end of the month, whatever the case is. So you grow up doing what you've seen. Right. And thank God you had good examples because it could be the other way.
Right. Vop, talk about your dad, because with your dad, I was just so amazed with these stories. I'm going to tell you, I had tissues. I was just like, so moved by all of the stories in the book. But you talk about your dad, because here you say that your dad was always present, both physically and mentally. He's always been there as a family. But he was more like a, and maybe I'm not saying the right word, but an instructor, he instructed, and, so there's like that difference. So talk about that. I was like, wow.
Sure. Now, remember now, my father was Nigerian, and his father died when he was young. And then when he was like 8, and then I was separated from him from the time I was 4 to the time I was 9 during the Biafran Civil War, when my mother brought us back to America. So when I got reintroduced to my father at 9, when we moved back after the war, it was a different thing. I think it was different for him, and it was definitely different for me to have this presence. But he was such a solid man. So I think what he ended up being in those early years between, let's say, 9 and 16 was more of an example, because I don't know that he had been sort of instructed in a way to have the sort of warm kind of, father-son kind of thing. But he knew what a son was about, because in Nigeria, your son is everything. So it wasn't necessarily the warm fuzzy kind of father-son kind of thing. It was more of, I respect this man. Other people respect this man. He's one of those, he could give you a look and you knew when you were veering off course. But it wasn't until I grew up and was maybe like in my late teens or 20s, I think he better understood how to relate to me as another man. So his approach, I think, was, there's also a distinction, with age in Nigeria. There's that distinction of, if I'm 2 days older than you, I'm your senior, and I can basically tell you what to do, right?
Wow.
So if you put it in the father's perspective, my job was to listen and to be obedient. And the relationship grew to the point when I was in my 20s that he was the one I would go to, because he always set an example. I think I told you he was Director General of the Highway Department for Nigeria, right? Educated in America. So he had American understanding, and my mother being American kind of more Americanized me. But he was just an example of someone I wanted to be like. I wanted to have that sense of presence. Daddy always knew right. And it was one of those, unfortunately, what he said was right. Even when he was right, and in the end, he was right. That part was hard, you know what I'm saying? But it was right, and that example continued. I got to know him better and got to listen, at least listen, and know when he says something. He knows what he's talking about. But listen, I'll just say it. And being an African father, just in case I decided I wasn't going to listen, right? Just, he reminded me, babe, son, I am your father with all the control over you that anyone has. So go willingly, or I could make you do it.
Right.
I love that man.
Yeah. Awesome. Chuck Williamson, tell us about your dad. The story that I found that was so interesting in the book is when you had your father was the coach, right? He was the coach for your team, and that whole racial experience and how he handled it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, my father was one of those men that he didn't really talk a lot, but he modeled behaviors that he thought you should have. I mean, one of the things that I remember was, there was never a question of whether I was going with him. So when we got up on Saturday mornings and he had things to do, I was dressed and ready to go. There was never a question. And so, from when he was coaching high school ball, I was right there on the field with him when I was 5, 6, 7. And so that the example I shared in the book was, we went to a field one time for a baseball game, I think it was, and he got out of the car and he was at the fence talking to 2 white men. One of them was the coach for another coach, and he came back to the car, and I said, "Are we not?" I was ready to hang out with my little friends, and I said, "We're not getting out." He said, "No, we're leaving." And I obviously disappointed. I think I was about 9. I said, "Why aren't we staying?" He said, "Well, they don't allow black people to play here." right? And so, when you're 9, you don't really understand that. I had white friends out there, and he said, so we're leaving. And I said, they don't allow black people to play here. He said, why? I said, why? He said, they're just ignorant, right? So we left, and later, I remember riding home that day thinking, should we be upset? Should we be crying? Should we be, tearing stuff up? But no, he told me, he said, one of the things you got to learn is that there's always going to be somebody who does not like you for some reason. He said, but he taught me, we're not going to let that dominate us, no matter where you are in life. It's always going to be there. Right. And so one of the things that he showed me was, one, compassion, even when it's hard. Wow. I remember that, many times he would tell me, he said, when you leave the house, you go off to college, there's going to be a professor, a coach that challenges you. Maybe they see you as less intelligence than your white counterparts. You have to overcome it. You got to be better. And so I just learned that one of the most valuable lessons he taught me was compassion for other people. I remember when he was coaching at a low inner city high school, every time we would go to practice, when we left, there were 5 or 6 kids with us in our Plymouth Fury. We had a big Plymouth Fury, and they would always go to McDonald's, Pizza Hut with us. And I was mad, I wanted my dad, right? And I asked him one time, I said, why do they always have to come with us? He said, because their parents can't afford to take them out to eat. So they're coming with us, or their dads aren't there. So they're coming with us. You might as well get used to it. Right. And so as I got older, I started to see and minister to other people's needs, whether it was easy or not. So, he taught me a lot of lessons without really saying a lot, right? Just by modeling. I've tried to do the same with my sons as they gotten older. When they were younger, let's go. They were with me, even when it wasn't convenient. And so I think that was just really powerful for me.
Right. I love what Les Brown, he says, what you do speaks so loudly that people can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it's what you do.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to save this next person for last, because his life is totally different than any other life that anyone else's life is on this phone. But first of all, I want to publicly thank him because we were at my aunt's funeral. And we haven't seen each other in a while. This is my cousin, Child Searcey. And he was telling me about his life and what he was doing. And I knew what his life was like before, and I'm going to have him share. But I was just so amazed that, he was in school. He had just got his master's degree, and he was just doing all these phenomenal things. And I got home that day, and I don't even know if I shared this with him, but I was sitting at the kitchen table, and the Lord said, I need to write this book called From a Black Man's Perspective, because people need to hear that their lives are different, and it doesn't make any difference, like whether you grew up in the hood and you use drugs and you're, because people can change their lives. And so I'm just so excited that he was able to join us today. And so I want him to talk a little bit about his experience in the book and his life and where he is now. And the amazing story about this woman that prayed for him while he was incarcerated. And so I don't want to tell all this story, but share with your thoughts about, your story in the book.
Yeah.
Look, and I told him before the call, I said, and no cussing. Okay.
Yeah. First of all, my father was a drug addict, right? Serious, hope to die, drug addict. But his drug of choice was heroin. He used to dress real nice and hang out, and he had friends that dressed real nice. They was all drug addicts, and he used to bring his friends by the house when I was a kid. And I agree with the brother that said that you are what you see, because that's what I seen, and I wanted to be like him. My mother never used drugs, never smoked, none of that stuff. And she was the one that taught me how to say thank you and please and all that kind of stuff. But my father, he was top notch for me. And I wanted to be like him. He told me one day, he said, if I ever see you using drugs, I'm gonna punch you in the face. I said, okay, I ain't gonna use no drugs. But I was always a fighter. And living in the projects, there was 8 of us. I was always a fighter, and I fought because I used to get teased when I used to come home from the welfare store, getting the powdered milk and the powdered eggs and the cheese. And they used to, and my friends used to say, "You coming from the second Stop and Shop?" You know, it wasn't the real Stop and Shop. I'm coming from the second Stop and Shop. So I used to get mad and I used to fight all the time, right? So one day I started using drugs when I was about 12 years old. And my father seen me. He caught me I was 13 and he caught me. And lo and behold, he punched me in the face, knocked me down. Said, "I told you." He said, "Now get up and go wipe your face off," because my nose was bleeding, my lip was all big. So I took that and I said, "Dad." He said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to take that." I said, "But if you ever hit me again, we going to be fighting." He said, "That's cool with me. If you winning, I'm going to stab you." I said, "Okay, I'm good with that." Because I'm from the street and this is the street thing. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm ready for it. Whatever comes, whatever comes. I still want to be like you. And when he seen that I wasn't going to veer off, he said, "Well, I might as well help him out so that he don't really get messed up." So he kind of like showed me the ropes for other streets. And I ended up being in the street till I was 50. I'm 67 now. I graduated with my master's degree, my bachelor's, my master's degree, and I'm graduating at the end of the year with my PhD. You know, and I did 16 years in prison.
Wow.
So, you know, I think that I turned out pretty good.
Let's talk about the lady that you were in jail. She prayed for you. She prayed that you were there. And talk about that, because in the book you talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was actually my son's mother. And she said to me, she wrote me a letter. And she said, "I'm praying for you." And she said, "I'm actually glad you're in there."
Wow.
And the reason being is because everybody in the street that was in the streets, that was from the streets, are dying. At least I know you ain't dead. You know what I mean? I know you safe where you at. Because if I was in the street, the kind of stuff that goes on in the street, you know, like, you know, ODs and catching AIDS and getting shot and getting stabbed and all that stuff, it's like second nature. It just happens, you know? So she was glad that I was there, you know? And she wanted to, and this is my son's mother. And my son, I was with him till he was 2 years old. I didn't see him again till he was 22. And right now, that's my best friend in the world. He loves me to death. He calls me every single day. And what I found out is that even at that age, at 22, he still needed me. He still needed me. And he was basically the reason why, when I got out of prison, that I changed my life. Because now I got a second chance at being with my son. And I took it. You know, and I wanted to show him. And my son went to school for economics, and he got a fantastic job at a bank, right? And he's making a lot of money. And he used to always say to me, "Dad, I want to get you this, Dad. I want to get you that, Dad. I want to do this for you and do that for you. And that's when I had a job, but I was making $750 every 2 weeks, right? And he wanted to do all this stuff for me. And I'm telling him, listen, I don't need you to do anything for me, because I wanted to show him that a man takes care of himself. A man don't, if you a man, you take care of yourself. Take care of your own business. You make sure the rent's paid. You make sure there's food on the table.
Mm.
You know what I mean? That's what a man does.
Mm.
And I wanted to show him that I didn't need him. Let me do what I do now. And right now I'm doing fantastic. I really am. And I got a fantastic wife. It ain't his mother, but I got a fantastic wife, and me and his relationship is excellent, and he looks up to me. He looks up to me and said, damn, man, look at my father doing this thing. Matter of fact, he went back he's in school now. He's back in school now, trying to follow my lead, So that's the story.
That's so awesome. So with all this being said, I really want to send a message to our young Black males that their lives can change. Even if you're in prison right now and there's a chance for you to get out of prison, that life isn't over because you make a mistake, and that everybody doesn't have their father in their lives. There's so many, and that's why I chose the two groups of men that had their fathers in their lives and how their lives turned out, and men who did not have their fathers in their lives, but their lives still turned out okay. Mm-hmm. And so, because, we know that God doesn't judge us, so we can't judge each other, but we have to look at I had a friend that said, in everybody, he said, even in the wickedest person, there is something good, but it never got a chance to rise up because there was no one there to help them rise up from the circle of influence that they were in. So before we close, I'd like for each one of you to just share what you think, give your feedback that it's never too late. It's never too late. So Bishop, I want to start with you.
Yeah, well, I would like to say that, you have to play with the cards you're dealt. There's no such thing as, hey, give me your cards. Hey, man, mine are better than yours. I'm not giving you mine. You know what I'm saying? So you have to deal with the card. You have to play with the cards you're dealt. Me being a faith person, and again, that's all I know. And I'll say to my man, your cousin, I was in school trying to be a bad guy, personating, because it seemed like the girls seemed like I didn't want to be a choir boy. I didn't want to be a preacher's kid. You can't get a girlfriend in junior high being a preacher's kid. You know what I'm saying? So I was trying to be, a bad guy. I was trying to cuss a little bit. I was never smoking and all that kind of stuff, but I was trying to have a little potty mouth, to say, I ain't no goody two shoes, and didn't know how good I had it, and didn't know how blessed I was. And of course, now 62 years old, I go to these reunions of 40 years and what have you, 50 years or whatever it is in high school. And I'm saying, man, I really did have it good. God was really looking out for me, because everybody's not cut for the streets, So I thank God for the hand that I was dealt. Now, did I always play the right cards? No. Did I misuse some? Yeah, absolutely. Did I try to get off and to try some things here and there? Yeah, I did. And thank God that his grace was looking out for me and covering me. And I will tell you, when I used to go to little parties, in high school or whatever, when I show up at the house parties, everybody be like, hey, man, what is he doing here? They even knew I didn't fit. They knew. I said, sometimes the adversary, he can let you know, man, you don't even belong out here. Hey, man, you blowing my high. Man, why don't you go on back home? Go to church somewhere. I'm like, hey, man, I can be here. I'm like, you know what? These people see something on me that maybe I'm taking for granted, And I thank God for my upbringing, and I thank God for the house that I grew up in. And I'll say this, Nora, I know we live in a time of, keeping it 100. We live in a time of transparent, I'm just trying to let everybody know what the real deal is. I thank God that our parents wasn't trying to be 100 in front of us. You know what I'm saying? they kept some things away from us, you know, and it's sad that my brother had to see his dad living that kind of life, you know, and I'm sure that my parents being a faith house, you know, and being a preacher and a preacher's wife, I guarantee you 41 years of marriage, they had some rough days, they had some times, but I never heard my dad cuss at my mom, you know, not saying he did or didn't, I don't believe he did, but I'm saying even if he did, I don't know nothing about that. And I'm glad that even when my parents were not at their best, they didn't let us see that, you know, because again, our children are being exposed to way too much, you know, and I know this is the time of keeping it 100. Well, I don't want to put on no airs. I said, listen, I know that you have to use the bathroom. That don't mean I need to see that. That's why they put a door on that bathroom. That's why they put a door on your bedroom. There's some things that don't need to be shared out in the public space. So I would say, you know, to fathers out there, hey, you know, you don't have a good day all the days. You don't have your best all the time. But, you know, try to keep your children sheltered from that. You know, when you having that rough day and losing it, that don't mean that they need to see that and hear all of that going on, you know. So, you know, I thank God for how I was brought up, and I thank God for the sheltered space that He placed me in, because it has blessed me to be who I am today. And again, everybody doesn't get to go out there and go to prison, come back and get 3 degrees and have a good job and have that time that they miss with their children. Now they get that time back. And you know, everybody doesn't get that. Sometimes when you lose it forever. So thank God that it turned out well for my brother, man. I'm so proud of you, man. You know, hey.
Thank you. Thank you.
God's blessings upon you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bob, what's your thought?
My thought is an example that my father used to give, and that is, where there's life, there's hope, and that there's always room for improvement. You know, even if we did not have an example in front of us, when we get to a certain point, we need to recognize, however, that we are now setting an example for others. That even if something before us did not work out, or did not look right, or was not right, there are others who we're setting an example for. And at some point, I think we need to grow up as men and realize that we are setting an example for other people. And I want to leave it, you know, there. You know, I serve on the city council here in Indianapolis, and I see every day the need for redemption, that there is a tomorrow, and that you still have an opportunity to get back on track. It may not seem like it, and we may not have it right in front of us, or not grow up necessarily with that in front of us, but somewhere out there, we know what a good example should look like. And I think it's incumbent upon all men, regardless of whether we had a father in place, and it's incumbent upon all men to set an example for those who are looking up to us.
Chuck Williamson.
Yeah, I would say, you know, one of the things I've learned in life, and you know, I was a law enforcement officer, police officer for 30 years, and now in higher education. You know, I've seen people come from tremendous lows to tremendous highs, and so I think one of the things as young black people, young black men, in spite of what's said about us sometimes, or the things that happen to us, anything's possible. We can get to where we want to be with some sound strategy. One of the things that you know, my father this was always frustrating with me with my father, but now I know why. Whenever I would complain, he would always say, "What are you going to do about it?" And if I didn't know what I was going to do about it, he would say, "Okay, this is what I think. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And so one of the things it taught me is that whenever I had an issue, and I think young black men need to understand that if you write down your vision, right, and then start looking for opportunities to actively walk toward it, whether that be people, mentors, if you have a father, that person, you can always get there. Right. You just have to ask the question is, how am I going to do this? And I think that's one of the most valuable lessons my father taught me, was to critically sit down and think and meditate and pray. Whenever I had an idea, you know, and I was a scratching my head idea, I'd always hear in my mind, well, what are you going to do about it? You know? And so every black man needs to understand that you can rise up no matter what's happening to you. And you need any idea can come to fruition if we write that vision down and seek some active mentors, examples. You know, Brother Searcey, when he told me that, when he told us that about the PhD and all that, that's powerful. Right? I'm sure there was a point where he couldn't see that.
Right.
That's always there.
Right.
Somebody's got to open it up for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Charles, what's your thought?
I'm of the viewpoint that there has to be a certain level of acceptance there. Okay, you have to accept what happened to you, what you did, wherever they got you in the position that you in. You accept it and don't play the victim. Okay, I accept it because whatever I did, it was a conscious decision. Okay, now you also have to realize that because you are still here, you are being blessed.
Yeah.
Okay, and because you being blessed, you need to take advantage of all the blessings that come your way, because there's much more blessings. Just because I'm getting ready to graduate with my PhD in clinical psychology, it ain't over. I'm still getting blessed.
Yeah.
Ever since I stopped using drugs, I've been getting blessed. I have never once took a backward step. Even when I was only making $750 every 2 weeks. I never once, I'm making almost $2,000 every 2 weeks now. You know, and my wife, and just so that I can put this in context, me and my wife was in the street drugging together. To the point where I would say to her, I said to her one day, I said, Mom, she said, what? I said, give me your wedding ring. She said, why? I said, just give me the goddamn, just give me the ring, right? And she gave me the ring, and I took it in the bodega and sold it for $30. So we could get some drugs. You know what I mean? But now she making more money than me. You know what I mean? We are blessed.
Yeah.
And we keep getting blessed. And that's what the brothers need to know, that the blessings are there for you, but you have to be able to recognize them, and you have to be able to accept them when they come, because they're there.
Right.
That's what I think.
Well, I want to thank you all for being my guest today on Real Conversations with Nora.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you for your insight on your topics today. It was so powerful. You were the last group. And it was just amazing. I have been amazing. It's been like we had to do 4 segments because there were so many of the men. And to my Real Conversation with Nora audience, please follow us on social media on Instagram at BWOT MFG, and on Facebook on Business Women on the Move for God. Visit my website at bwotmfg.com and sign up for our weekly, sign up for our mailing list rather, and make sure you stop by our retail store where you'll find lots of great items for you, your family, and friends, along with my latest book, which we discussed today, From a Black Man's Perspective, which is now on Amazon. We're so excited.
Fantastic.
So excited. Ask your friends to watch the show each week with you and share it with others. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Real Conversations with Nora. Have a blessed week. God bless you, and see you next week.